that shortly after that, COVID happened, so we haven't been able to feel each other, and I feel like it's been an eternity, through the past 2 years, and that we're all really different. Like, I feel like such a completely new person. We all got collectively composted. It was a big old heap, that whole era. And so I was just feeling into the tenderness of the time that we're in, and there's a lot to feel in order to heal together. And my prayer is that this space here today can really be an embodiment and a gesture towards us consistently showing up in the spirit of beloved community and knowing and remembering, who we are and what we came here for, is to love each other, to love, and to really feel that we have deep healing that we need to participate in together, and we all deserve to heal. SPORE has this hashtag and a campaign that we're uplifting called The Right to Heal. And it is about recognizing that, yes, that is all of our right. And with that, though, it's our responsibility to participate in restoring our relations. Because we have a lot of restoration of trust and healing that needs to happen between different people, between different bodies, between different communities, between the different parts of ourselves, for us to be able to really show up for this collective healing, collective liberation work. So this is ceremony. This is part of the integration. This is how we learn integrity together. And I'm gonna stop spitting these bars and transition us into a conversation with a dear new friend of mine, Evan Segura, who met in Oakland, met at the Oakland Psychedelic Conference.
Shout out to Reggie.
Shout out Reggie Harris in Oakland Hi-Fi. And so we have Evan here. Clap it up for Evan. I'll have y'all do further introductions. And then Sabrina Shimari. Sovereign's recently joined SPORE, community engagement and events focus, but also just really actually came to get up in SPORE's guts and alchemize us so we can embody the shit we're talking about, walking the talk, So I'm just, this feels like a huge culmination. Sabra and I met 2 years back at Naropa, and we've been talking about when are we really gonna sync up and do this work together. And just in the past few weeks, brought Sabra on, also brought Sarah. They've sit on as a new addition to SPORE. So just remember those faces, and after this conversation, we'll be hanging out. I'll be here y'all are gonna leave, but I'm gonna kick it. So these are the SPORE folks. There's a lot of people who are very involved in this ecosystem here. David, AG, Sean, Jazz, you already know, Yellow, Teddy. The gang is all here. Melanie, Rumsey. If I didn't say your name, you know I'm gonna give you a kiss later, so L. So yeah, we're just gonna get into it. We're just gonna have a little facilitated dialogue. We have Evan here to talk to us Coloradans. Most people here, I think, are probably from the area or live here currently, about what Colorado can learn from what's happened in Oregon, which is the only state that currently has a statewide policy reform for regulated, therapeutic, pretty much psilocybin-assisted experiences. Not just confined to therapy there. There's a similar policy measure that's happening in Colorado for the state. That there's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of parallels, including the people who are taking part in that campaign. So while that's underway here, it's a great opportunity to learn from someone who lived through an experience of that whole process and how the policy came to be in the campaigning, and then what has happened in the implementation, the development. So it's a real gift. It's a real blessing to have you here, because this is how we can weave these big bridges between these different ecosystems where it's happening and learn from each other. So thank you again for being here. So we'll have this facilitated dialogue for an hour-ish, transition around 7:20, and then we're going to open it up for community Q&A, just people, whatever you're curious about, speak up, and then after that we'll just be hanging out for whenever they kick us out, until they kick us out. I'm going to pass the mic now, let y'all introduce yourselves, and I'll just get into it.
Hi everybody. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Just wanted I don't know, I do this thing to help regulate myself. It's like I look into everyone's eyes just to, make a connection. Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to say, and I'll just keep it quick, is there is this thing that we humans do around repeating history and just the cycles of repeating what we know. And I would like for us, as we have this conversation, to think about how, as just thinking about repeating history, and also maybe providing a lens around addiction to power and repeating history and what that means, as we have this conversation. And before we get into that, my name is Sabrina Shimari. I'm originally from California, moved here in 2017 for multiple reasons, but ultimately I think I came here to heal. There was a great turmoil in my life, and I invite everyone to come and ask me about it. I'd love to tell you the story. But yeah, I came here to heal, and this is kind of the manifestation of that journey, being here with you all as the right to heal continues. Like, I'm also deeply healing, and it's something that I'm very committed to. But yeah, I'll keep it there. I'm happy to be here and see all of you. And please come talk to me after this. I would love to have a conversation with everyone who feels the need to. Sorry about that. So I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
I'm gonna go over here.
Thank you, Saber. Hi, everybody. Hola. Hi. My name is Evan Segura. Use he, they pronouns. And yeah, I'm just so happy and honored and grateful to be here and meeting so many of you. And yeah, thank you, Duffy. Thank you, Saber. And thank you, SPORE. Thank you, Jazz, for bringing me here and more. And yeah, I've got so many lessons that I'd just kind of like to help kind of plant here, little seeds and experiences that I've been going through the legalization and decriminalization process in Oregon for the last 2 years, that I think have, really negatively affected our community, that all of you don't have to experience. You don't have to go through the same mistakes and strife that we did, because we already fucked up. So y'all don't have to, we can learn. But you probably will, but that's okay, I'm so proud and so impressed of your community here. I think there's so much potential to birth a revolutionary system that can reintegrate these medicines into our society, that can help so many people in your communities. And so, I just want to congratulate y'all, I guess kind of preemptively, but you've got something beautiful here, and I hope that you all realize that, and I'm just blessed to be in all of your presences tonight. So thank you again. I moved to Oregon 3 years ago to help volunteer on the campaign to legalize psilocybin services in Oregon. Immediately started working as a mental health counselor at a foster home and at a juvenile detention center for young men in Oregon, and started apprenticing with an underground facilitator at the time. I helped him grow his mushrooms for his clients, and he helped me kind of learn the ways of holding space and keeping people safe during these experiences and getting the most out of building a relationship with psilocybin mushrooms. So I'm eternally grateful for the experience that I've had so far in this movement, and I just want to keep offering these same opportunities and blessings that have been offered to me. So yeah, I want to echo Sovereign. Please talk to me, ask me anything that we don't cover later tonight, or get at me through social media or whatever, but I'm really excited for this conversation and hope to help in any way, shape, or form that I possibly can. So thank you, everybody.
Do we like this microphone setup, or do we want Evan snuggled right up in the middle between? Yeah, it's starting to get chilly too, so I'm let's close, right? Cuddle conversations with Duffy and Sabrina. That's the real All right. Oh, that was an ancestor. Yeah, so where I would like to start is Monica. Shout out Monica. We've already shouted her out, but let's keep doing that. Monica Cadena, Co-Ecosystem Director at SPORE, let me know that she talked to you recently about a trip that you took to Mexico. And I don't know the specifics of your heritage, but I'm Chicano. And, so that she felt like you had some things to share to really set some deeper context before we start talking about policy and that sort of stuff. Anything that you learned through that experience that feels like something that you would want to offer the folks here today?
Yeah. Thank you. And also shout out to Monica. Your lack of presence here is felt, and everybody misses you. And yeah. Shout out to Monica. So last year, I took an 8-month pilgrimage on my motorcycle. I drove from Portland, Oregon, all through Mexico, down to Antigua, Guatemala, and then back up. And I learned so much about Mexican culture, about where my family is from. My dad immigrated here when he was 18 years old. I'm a first-generation American, and I had some extremely powerful medicine ceremonies with the Zapatistas from Chiapas, and I'd say that's probably where most of my lessons learned in Mexico come from, is from just getting to peek into these matriarchal, indigenous-led communities that have so much to teach us in Estados Unidos about how we need to change our culture and how we need to orient our communities and uplift Black and Indigenous women as the leaders to help fucking save us, honestly. But viva las Zapatistas. I am incredibly grateful for what I got to experience there and what I got to deprogram from myself as someone who was raised in the U.S. public school system, and all the internalized racism and things that come with growing up in this racist country. Just getting to experience the beauty of so many genuine and authentic communities down there just helped me kind of release so many of those things. It helped me learn a different way that I now know is possible and that I'm trying to bring into my communities here. And like I said, I'm so privileged to have gotten to experience that and go down there and be accepted into some of these communities. But they also have a YouTube channel, so learn about the Zapatistas. Read their textbooks. Learn about communist, socialist communities that are trying to change the way that they live at a grassroots level. And It was an amazing trip. It changed my life, and I'm extremely grateful. Viva Mexico también. Yeah, I think that's all I got though. It was dope.
No, I have so many questions. And one of them is like, I mean, as we have this conversation, like, so you went through this, you know, this experience with, is it I-109? Yeah, and just like from what you said off top of like, you know, learning about being a matriarchal system and like those different things, like, I just want to say, like, how do you feel like that was part of your experience here, like the differences? I guess I want you to talk about the differences, just like your experience with that, and with this experience you had in Mexico, like, you know, tying like what could we learn moving forward and how we, you know, move in the directions that we move, who we listen to, who we don't listen to. Just wanted to see if you had any wisdom on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I had a pretty powerful mushroom experience in a town called San Jose del Pacifico in Oaxaca.
I was there!
You know about it?
Yes!
It's an amazing place, and Oaxaca is an incredible state in Mexico that is, like Colorado and Oregon in Estados Unidos, one of the most progressive states in Mexico. And they have these things called usos y costumbres, which is basically like autonomy for any local municipalities that get to decide how they want their places to be governed. And so there's this magical mushroom village of San Jose del Pacifico that saw the opportunity to share this medicine with the world and with anybody that travels there. And also, you know, when Usos y Costumbres were integrated there, one of the first things they did was abolish their police department and just like eliminate any cop presence, because they realized that they didn't need them, even to run this model. They don't need, you know, police officers to complicate everything. So that was really powerful to see, and I think that we should try to do that in Portland. We tried in the summer of 2021. It didn't work out that well, but we're still trying. Shout out to, you know, all the anti-fascists out there that are fighting cops. And I was really inspired by some of the systems that they had set up in Mexico and the autonomy that they had given to local communities. I don't think that exactly carries over with what we're attempting to do with Measure 109. We're giving a lot of power to medical experts and legislators to decide how our communities are going to heal ourselves, and I'm not as convinced that that's the way to move forward.
That's nice. So could you give the folks here an overview, brief of 109, just the gist of it, and maybe speak to who is largely behind the campaign, who's really kind of leading and holding power now, what equity looks like. Those are just some touch points. We'll circle back. I got my phone here. I'm not texting, so
I got you. Yeah, thank you, Duffy. Yeah, so Measure 109 is also known as the Oregon Psilocybin Services Act now that it has passed, and what it is doing is establishing a regulatory framework for psilocybin services. High emphasis on regulation. So anyone over the age of 21, as soon as like fall of next year, is going to be able to go to a regulated service center and sit with a facilitator and take a dose of mushrooms and then leave that service center. There's some requirements that are very similar to the ones being implemented here through NMHA. You need a preparation session and at least one integration session before and afterwards. The qualifications to become a facilitator is just a GED, but you have to go through a training program that is regulated by the state and then become licensed by the Oregon Health Authority to be able to hold space in any of these service centers. So Yeah, it doesn't decriminalize anything. It doesn't legalize microdosing. It doesn't allow you to trip at home or outside or anything like that. It's just legal service centers that you can legally go to trip at with someone who's been trained to hold space for you. And that's it. And I feel like another important part that is becoming more and more apparent is that the average cost of a psilocybin session at any of these service centers, average is going to be about $2,000 US. That is the low end of the average cost of what these places are going to be. It's much more quickly turning into psilocybin retreat centers than it is service centers that are going to be in service to the community to help us heal those most in need dealing with trauma. There's lots of initiatives to create funds that will help provide scholarships or sponsorships to both facilitators that want to get trained and to people that want to access the services. But I personally don't believe that that's a very sustainable model if we're all just kind of like, being supported by millionaires to be able to eat mushrooms. It just like doesn't really feel cool to me. But that's an overview, yeah. Is that?
I just love the back.
Yeah.
They can't stand that. Soccer. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, question? Oh, was it?
Yeah. Well, my question, who let this? What was
Who let this happen?
Who did this? Whose manager do I need to speak to? For real.
Yeah, totally. So I got to take a little bit of accountability. It was partly me. We sold this to a lot of people as this revolutionary framework that was going to give so much access to people, was going to create jobs, it was going to create access to the mushrooms, and we couldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That was something that was said so often, and I know that's bullshit now. But yeah, so this was primarily started by a PAC called New Approach, who I'm sure lots of y'all are familiar with here. They've now come to Colorado and are pushing this forward under the guise that they've learned a lot from what they were doing in Oregon, so they've made changes. I'll give them a little bit of credit. The NMHA bill is so much fucking cooler than Measure 109. I'm so jealous of you guys, even though it has a lot of cracks in it as well. There's lots of things that could definitely be adjusted within that bill. But New Approach PAC, and the chief petitioners were Tom and Sheree Eckert, and it got, I think, 1.2 million votes as a yes. So I'm also, I want to say 1.2 million people in Oregon kind of helped make this happen, but the people leading the initiative is the New Approach PAC.
So, something we've been reckoning with here, as we could tell so many stories about how the NMHA got to where it is now. And there's two big policy initiatives alive for the state in Colorado. There's a decrim initiative that's just focused on decrim for the same group of medicines addressed in the Natural Medicine Health Act. Anyone who feels called to raising their hand as a representative of that initiative and campaign, you're welcome to do so right now, so people can see. Yeah, just so people know in the room, like who. No, I'm sorry. The decrim initiative, which is different than NMHA. So there's two. I want to invite y'all to let it be known, and also anybody from who's on the steering committee with NMHA here, if you want to raise your hand. All right, cool. So there's people in community that are part of these policy initiatives, and how these policy initiatives have gotten to where they are has largely come through a process of community organizing in response to a push for policy that largely nobody asked for, to be straight up. No one was like, hey, New Approach, well, Someone was, actually. But there wasn't a community call for anybody to come here and be like, hey, we need some policy reform here. Stat, please, come, save us, please. There was none of that. It just happened. And community here responded, and I've kind of likened it to a metaphor of, to me, it felt kind of disastrous. The sudden impact of this huge pack with all this power that does some polling, see that it's politically viable, see that they can basically get what they want to create a regulatory framework, and nothing's going to stop them. Because of the work, honestly, that, you know, Colorado just being what Colorado is, being a sort of, you know, a progressive state, and as far as drug policy goes, is the first at the front of cannabis. There's this weird libertarian pulse here, but it's also like a purple state. It's just a weird ass place we live in. Shout out Colorado. But the arrival, to me, the metaphor that I was sitting with through the whole process, like, this is like a hurricane. Suddenly just hit the people here, and largely people have no idea. We're a small little bubble, this community, that has any awareness that this is even happening. And you know, part of the policy strategy with many different packs like this is to fly under the radar as much as possible. So with the mainstreaming of psychedelics and the narrative that is really dominant in that, you know, around medical boom for mental health issues, to treat depression, to treat anxiety, so the general public is seeing all that. There was an article in Newsweek, the cover was psilocybin is the new Prozac. This is literally what the general public is seeing. So they're seeing like, oh yeah, this is, I suffer from depression. I have family that suffers from depression. So people see a medical therapeutic framework is like, yes, people are just coming out of all of the stigmatization and programming and, you know, yeah, like people are just starting to surface from all of the drug war propaganda that we've had for so long. So we decriminalized in Denver, in the city, just in 2019. It feels like a long time ago because of COVID. It was just yesterday. And suddenly we're talking about, you know, this push for the whole state. Well, we haven't had the space and time to organize, to educate people, to not even educate people in a paternalistic sort of way, but to like learn from each other, be like, what is actually needed for us to heal? What does responsible stewardship with medicine look like? Who are the legacy stewards of medicine that have held this, not just throughout their entire lifetimes, but hold lineage intact of generational healing in community? Not just working with the psychedelic medicines, but actually are leaders and healers in their communities. So, all that's to say, in the struggle here to respond to that, I kind of felt like, you know, the hurricane is like essentially what disaster capitalism, I don't know if you've ever heard that term, does. Like, something that capitalism does really well is create a big impact that creates chaos. It's built into capitalism. They call it, what do they call it? Disrupting the market, right? Isn't that what they call it?
That sounds right.
Yeah, there's a good book called The Shock Doctrine, but essentially, you know, disruption in capitalism is like something that's like very lifted up as a good thing because it creates this new space in the market. So when an impacting community puts people in kind of a spiral, people with power and a big machine and billions of dollars behind them can move in and set up shop. So, for instance, this happened in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, that it became like this crypto haven, you know, and same with Katrina, like actual natural disasters, people, but then also there's like intentional creation of these sorts of ruptures in community. So that's what it's felt like for me. The way that we've responded, to me, I've been calling it like disaster cooperativism, and it really has been beautiful to see the community here, and it's also been terribly difficult sometimes, struggling with like people that we love, but like, you know, fighting and things like that, but really struggling to to feel and hear each other because we're in this pressure cooker. But how we've come together and what has emerged has been this very mycelial response, I feel. And the impact that this community was able to make in holding this policy making accountable. Evan was at our first town hall meeting of the My Coalition, that a lot of the community power around shaping all of this and like holding us accountable, holding this accountable and us accountable, and you know, creating our capacity to be able to respond and shift power in this situation. Evan was at that first meeting, he just happened to be in town, and I felt all fucked up after that meeting because I was like, oh my God, like, because it was just, you know, it's all so much, and I'm like, man, there's like no coherence here, like, none of us know what to do. And that was kind of like the tender, kind of vulnerable grace that we had to kind of like come into together, like to be in a room with each other and be like, oh, like none of us actually know what the fuck to do, and we have to come together to figure out what that could be. And Evan came and was like, up to me after that meeting, I remember, he was like, yo, y'all got it. He's like, y'all, this is the most powerful thing I've seen in this whole movement. I'm like, for real? Because that felt like a big mess. And he was like, if we had something like this in Oregon, we could have done so much more. And that made me recognize, remember, the power that we have here, that we got it. We've never needed a new approach. We don't need a pack. We don't need none of, we got it. And new approaches here, the policy's moving forward, and we have to, it's undeniable. So how are we gonna continue to build power, to build the vision of the world that we want to be in community together? I know I just went on a whole long thing, but I'm just kind of setting stage for the rest. Something that we've been, looking at is like the policy, just starting off what you were just saying, the policy analysis of the NMHA. We've been like, what does this language actually do? Mm-hmm. And I think that's important for all of us to really get clear on, so we can understand and have that clarity to know like where are the parts of the language that are open to interpretation and all that. But then also we've been really reckoning with like the power analysis. It's not just about the language, it's like who actually like holds power and is given power in this to control and determine what this actually looks like. All of that is undetermined here largely, and we have a huge ability to impact that, but I just want to that's all to lead into, I want to ask you, what has equity looked like in the NMHA, and where do you feel like the power, I'm sorry, not NMHA, but 109,
yeah.
Where do you feel like that's really held now, and is there work being done to really build authentic equity after the passing of 109?
Yeah, thank you for all that, for sure. Yeah, equity in Measure 109. I'm just like feeling myself get triggered because it's a very convoluted question. From my personal perspective, what I saw was a lot of people that did genuinely care about equity at the beginning get sealed into this tiny subcommittee, the equity subcommittee, where all of the other mostly white folks on the advisory board got to just kind of like put the cap on that jar and just not give a fuck about whatever they had to say, right? We should not have equity subcommittees. We should have equity trainings for everybody on the whole fucking team, and then they should have to listen to all of the people that contain that wisdom and that knowledge about how these things actually can be equitable. Don't let them siphon away the people that actually know how to create equity into a box and then ignore them, because that's what we've experienced here in Oregon. And it's a shame because it really burnt out and discouraged a lot of the amazing good people that we had within the Measure 109 advisory board that were just sick of getting disregarded and ignored and not listened to. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about how equity has gone down. And then, we're talking about equity, as an investor, they care about that equity a lot. They love that equity, and they are building it for themselves by the millions, by the tens of millions, and preparing to extract it from our communities when we could be building that same equity for our children and for generations within our communities, but we can't because they're already here siphoning it, taking it away. And on that note, I want to give just a shout out and an acknowledgement to all of our brothers and sisters that are sitting in actual cages right now because these policies, so-called progressive policies, weren't here quick enough to help them before they got arrested and imprisoned for using these drugs to try to give these medicines away to people. Where's the equity for them? That's what I want to know. So, yeah, that's what I got for that question.
So, in my mind right now, right, I'm a solutions-oriented person. I'm like, okay, this thing happened, we're here. Mm-hmm. How do we move from where we are to somewhere else? Is that possible? Mm-hmm. What could equity look like and what's already been done? I just want to know how you feel about that, if there is, or do we need to pull up?
Yeah.
Do we need to pull up and fight?
Yeah. One word: decriminalization. Decriminalize. Take power. Don't let them decide how you're going to use this or how you're going to. Or I guess it's a two-word thing. Decriminalize first, because what I'm perceiving now is this huge gap between Measure 109 and Measure 110. And there's a lot of miseducation in our communities around these two measures.
People don't know what Measure.
Right. So Measure 109 is this system that creates access to these regulated psilocybin services that I was talking about. And Measure 110, which was spearheaded by the Drug Policy Alliance in DC, fully decriminalized personal amounts.
Fully, right. Okay, personal amounts. Right?
Yeah, personal amounts of all drugs. So those have limits. You can have up to 14 grams of psilocybin. You can have up to 40 tabs of LSD, which is a personal amount. I want to meet that person. But yeah, it was kind of sold as okay, here's the decrim and then here's the legalization, but it's not true. It only decriminalizes personal amounts, and it does it in this weird ass way where if you're caught by a cop with a personal amount, you either get a $100 ticket or you can take a free mental health assessment and then go to a recovery treatment center. So fucking weird ass hoops to make people that are just trying to get high go through, in my opinion. But back to this gap, right? We have that and then the regulated service model. So now there's all these people that are not going to subscribe to Measure 109, that are doing safe psychedelic therapy in the underground, growing mushrooms and distributing those mushrooms and sitting with them for people and giving them away to their friends and foraging them outside, that are now completely vulnerable. And one of my biggest fears is that, like we all saw in cannabis, which was also mostly, steamrolled by New Approach Pack, we're going to see, as people in the legal market start to make a lot of profits, they are going to use those profits to lobby against the criminals in the underground markets that are affiliated with the cartels and all of these things that are not true. It's complete propaganda that they will use to protect and secure their profits through their legalized markets. And if we're not careful and we don't close this gap with decriminalization, then that is bound to happen. Even if those gaps are kind of closed, they can still peel back at them. I'm not as familiar with the cannabis market, but just meeting all the folks here that I have so far that were really involved, there's so much talk about how they're chipping away at all of these rights that they have supposedly put there to protect people, and now they're just slowly peeling them all away. So, yeah.
So, I have a teacher who taught me a practice he calls being troubled aloud. And I think part of our responsibility as people who are participating and organizing around policy, around shaping change that are going to have generational impacts, that we have to let ourselves be troubled, by the complexity, by it not being as simple as we might want to make it. And when we receive new information, nothing's ideal. None of our ideals are what we exist in, because we live in a co-created reality, and largely in this country we're living in the dystopian imagination of, a white colonial mind. So let's abolish that. And on the tip of like current, what's happening with policy around the country, we could have never imagined, but maybe we should have known better, that decriminalizing mushrooms in Denver would then turn into like everywhere all at once. We're like, damn, that was fast. And there's been a lot of excitement, and a big part of me is no one should be going to jail. Nobody should be going to jail. Period. We need to end the drug war completely. Period. In Colorado, something that has been really impactful in shaping me, and I know a lot of other people's perspectives on policy, has been the emergence of a group that was called for a while Indigenous Voices. Yolo and Teddy have been a part of that group. And but just the presence of Indigenous perspective in this whole policy conversation, where there's this other part that really hasn't largely been considered by the policy movement, which is like, well, yes, like nobody should be going to jail. This is my interpretation of basically a whole group of people and different people giving a perspective. Yes, nobody should be going to jail. These laws need to change. And if we're still perpetuating culturally these like very extractive and like quick rush to creating like access to medicine, and we don't really have like an established way of supporting communities and regulating to ensure that Indigenous communities are respected and are sovereign, that medicine, that these Indigenous medicines are respected in their sovereignty, especially with certain medicines that are going extinct, quickly, that there's legitimate concern that I don't think is being really reckoned with the really quick push for this policy reform. And it's really troubled my ideas of like, what does being in solidarity mean? What does abolition mean with this work? Because the laws are part of it, but they're just a part. Like, we have to abolish the laws, but the carceral system is in our relationships, it's in our communities, it's in our bodies, it's how we continue to perpetuate harm and violence and domination through our social ecosystems. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna stop with these long-ass prefaces to these questions, but I feel the need to presence that, because this is something that I want us to be troubled with aloud, like have actual conversations around, because I don't know what to do, because I'm conflicted. Yeah. And I just want you to speak to your feels on how quickly the policy movement is moving, and do you have concerns around that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I want to bring up is just that conflict is inevitable, even within like the strongest parts of your community, there will be disagreements. And if you aren't anticipating that, then you will suffer as a community. And the policy and the people that are leading these policies are kind of doing this thing where they're kind of dangling this carrot in people and trying to get them onto their sides, you know, and then once they've bought them, they can kind of use them to divide your community. And you can't let them do that. You need to stay together. But you can only do that if you have preemptively built systems to address the conflict and to address the harm. Because if you don't, then you're just gonna cancel each other until there's like 2 fucking people left in this room and there's nobody left because everybody pissed everybody off and then you're all canceled and so nobody's here. So make alliances with your Denver conflict resolution mediators, talk to these people that know how to address these things, and start to create the tracks and systems for your community so that when these things happen, it looks like people have to kind of pause and acknowledge the harm, but still kind of keep with the trajectory and keep forward towards the goal, instead of like harm, boop, gone. Like people are just gonna be gone. I've watched the activist and the rag community that we had in Portland, even just within the last year, just splinter off and lose our connection to each other because this person got bought off by this corporation, and this person got bought off by this corporation, and this person that pissed this person off, and then these people hate that person because they pissed this person off. So now there's these huge wedges within our community that are, I hope, can be resolved, and that some of them, they have processes, but all I can think of is like, man, if we would have just talked about this a year ago, we'd be in a much different place. So while you all still mostly like each other, figure that shit out, you know, so that it doesn't tear you apart, you know. Yeah, when shit hits the fan. Yeah. I feel like that wasn't a full answer to your question, and I kind of forget your question now.
Can I?
Yeah.
So to loop it back, because I just want to pin something that I heard in that, because yeah, so the ruptures and the conflict can happen, and then people getting canceled, and people decide not to stay in relationship, and that's a form of bypassing. The other form of bypassing is when like harm is being addressed. It's like an acknowledgement is a part, right? But then it's like, what about restoration and reparation, and to make sure that these harms aren't being perpetuated, that when a rupture or a harm like that is caused, it is moved into as an opening to change, to heal. And a lot of times it's like what we see, because people are so outcome driven, it's like, well, that sucks for y'all, we got to keep it moving though.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, just maybe speak to that, you know, like the speed, because that's what it's like. The speed in and of itself at the foundation is harmful.
Yeah.
And that's hard to reckon with, because people who are going to prison, who are in prison, are like, that sounds nice, you know, slowing down, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. We cannot allow the capitalist machine to propel us into our own destruction. We totally can tell it to fuck off and tell it to slow down, but we all have to make that, you know, that agreement and that stance, you know, unanimous, you know, with at the same time together. The speed of Measure 109 and its implementation in Oregon was extremely destructive. Like I said, I think it's broken apart many communities, many close friendships. It has just steamrolled, and no one has been able to put a strong enough wrench in this machine to make it stop. We're at the point where the rules are about to be drafted and revised by the Oregon Health Authority, which will then publish these rules in December, in June, and then again in December, and then the program will be rolled out in January. But I've recently spoken with some lawyers, and they've kind of clued me into the fact that the state government, for as fucked up as it is, like won't it won't rush. You know, the money and the PACs, they can rush the ballot measures, but it's very rare for the state government to rush something through legislation and pass it if there's a ton of controversies and problems with the system. So a lot of people are actually anticipating that the state is about to pause Measure 109. And not pause it, but just extend the rollout. Because 2 years to create a completely new system that is going to attempt to integrate these medicines back into our society is not enough time. Especially when the intention is like, let's profit off of this, and not like, how do we figure out sustainability within our communities and uplift those people that can actually lead us to a healthy place. So, yeah, I think in almost every situation, slowing down is probably the answer. Check in with your community, make sure that everybody's on the same page before anybody hits, you know, the green button that propels you to the next stage. Just slow down. Yeah. Yeah. Take a deep breath.
Sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say too, like, again, solutions-oriented person, also Aquarius, so I tend to travel in time, particularly to the future. There is a future that exists, like, beyond our veil that's waiting for us, and part of it is asking to reorient around time, around culture, around bodies. There's this call for us to slow down in a real way, but I think it takes us being willing to actually do it and go through the growing pains of going through a slower pace. Because some of us, you know, as quiet as it's kept, we're addicted to capitalism. And the withdrawals are what we're trying to keep ourselves from experiencing. Now is the time to experience them. That's the only way we're gonna get out or get free. We have to slow down. And so, yeah, I just wondering, like, what does it look like for us to, like, collectively agree? Because, like, all of us in this space could collectively agree to a new concept of time, a new concept of relationship. We could decide that that actually is a puppy if we wanted. Like, anything and everything is possible, and all of us, I am assuming, have, like, touched psychedelics in some way, shape, or form. So, like, if it can transform your mind and give you such powerful experiences, like, why aren't we finishing the circuit and manifesting that in physical form with each other? And it just gags me that we don't do that. I'm waiting, but it's just this thing that I'm just hoping and I'm wishing, and I guess I'm just adding to what you're saying. It's like, you know, we have to come up with something so that we all collectively agree to, like, start to change our reality. It's like we all as individuals get it, and we're like, yeah, like, I had this really transformative experience, and one with nature, one with, you know, the mushrooms speak to me, and I'm just like, well, girl, I'm gonna need mushrooms to tell you how do we slow down time now. Like, she's telling you how to do it, so, like, let's go through it and let's do it, because we're running out of options. Because, like, what happens after, like, say what happened to you happens here, then what? Like, now is the time for us to figure this out now. We're running out of road.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, we like to make this joke in Oregon. Given all of the conflicts and all of the miscommunication and the pain that has happened and the struggles that we are having with communicating with each other, we like to joke that if only there was this magic something that allowed us to connect more with each other that we could use to come together as a community. If only there was something that we could use to understand each other more deeply and kind of work through some of these issues. What is it? I don't know, man. What? And also give us the capacity to dream and to accept our dreams and to believe in them and to work towards them to each other and actually trust that there is a really bright future ahead for us, for our children, for our children's children, where they can be happy and hopeful for the future and not like doom scrolling pictures of Putin on Instagram or something like that, you know? There's a really bright future, and these medicines can help us imagine that and then help us get on the same page together. But we have to fucking use them. We can't just keep talking about them. We have to use them as a community and by ourselves, but, you know, integrate them as a community. And that needs to happen. I'm super stoked to hear that that's like happening here in Denver. And I encourage y'all to keep doing that. Keep taking the medicine with each other. That's the only way we're gonna get through this.
You're bringing the medicine. You are medicine. We are medicine.
We are the medicine.
And medicines help us remember, you know, there's space for all of our parts to belong, to remember all of the parts of us, our experience, all the parts of us as a individual and as community as being sacred, that we need all of these parts to harmonize. And you can't have too much room. You can't have too much room, you can't have too much space for us to really be with each other. And that's what we need. So yes, you know, mushrooms teach us, not even just through the experiences that we have through liberating pathways of consciousness and our relations and all of, you know, when we talk about our pathologies, these are our pathways to interconnectedness that trauma has blunted us from being able to actually experience, feel, and belong to. But also looking at just the mycelium. Like, there's no better teacher of a solidarity network, of a community of care, of synergy, of building these critical relationships. Mycelium does this thing where the hyphae, they reach out to plant roots before they penetrate the cell wall. They actually send a signal for consent. Do y'all know this? They send a signal, the mycelial hyphae, which is basically like the root ends of the mycelium, send a signal and wait for a response before they make the connection for the transformation. That's what we mean when we say move at the speed of trust. Consent, consensual relations. Because it sounds silly or like counterproductive to the hyper-productive capitalist conditioning. You mean you're gonna wait to like sit in circle and like talk it out and get to know each other and feel it? Yeah. Yes. Of course we are. Because what we keep doing is creating huge messes and causing so much harm in community. When we're talking about healing, we're not embodying the medicine. If the policy work is fracturing communities and breaking trust, what the fuck is it for? You know? Access to what? Healing what? So, given where Colorado's at and everything that, you know, where we're at with this thread right now, I'm wondering what you feel like, given that the laws do need to change, right? I stand by that. What does policy work, being in solidarity, look like?
I think maintaining these lines of communication with the actual people that these policies are going to affect is extremely important. Number one, poor people, people that can't use their capital or money to like buy the law, which is how this country works. People from marginalized communities, our black and brown folks, our queer folks, our young people. Making sure that there's direct lines of communication and feedback between our policymakers and our lawyers and our legislators and people from this community. Because if we listen to them, then we will all benefit. We will all get to a better place if they are given more access and given more rights and given more power. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm recognizing a thing I do sometimes where I can get a little, because I think, you know, it's part of our biology to like focus on the negative things. And part of what I wanted to say, what slipped, you know, it's why the speed of trust is important. It's not just about harm reduction, because we reduce the harm that we cause when we're in relationship together, because we can know and feel each other. But also for the quantum leaps that we're wanting to take, these portals of liberation that we're trying to open up and step through together, they will come through that, through building, feel me? You just hop through one. Through our relationships, that's where the real alchemy is. So yeah, I'm with the urgency of these times, you know. But a lot of times the crisis, the way that we respond to the crises is the crisis, is part of the crisis itself.
Yes.
We have 10 minutes before we open it up. We have 10 minutes before we open it up. Well, this last question I would like to...
Because I have no further questions.
Well, sure. I'm going to read it right off the phone. Let's do it.
Yeah, is there anything that you feel needs to be spoken, a question that you wished was asked by us? Any, you know, we're going to go into Q&A, but
Sure.
if there were going to be like closing remarks, a takeaway, something that you really want to give us, what would that be?
Yeah, I think something that I haven't mentioned yet is just addressing psychedelic exceptionalism in these spaces, and how we need to be in solidarity with all drug users in our communities. We cannot abandon them and leave them behind, and we need to acknowledge the harms that the war on drugs has caused through drugs like alcohol, you know, and drugs that have much higher risk towards folks without the harm reduction programs and benefit maximization, like education, being put in place. And that starts young. Kids are watching how we are using drugs right now and figuring out, what are adults doing for fun? What are they doing to connect with each other? What are they doing to like take the edge off? And we need to address that like at the source. Like, I know it like sounds edgy, but like talking to the public school systems here and like starting to actually create these education reforms to be able to support everybody in this. Like you said, like, I mean, like, we can all say, let's end the war on drugs, but where the fuck do we start? And which drugs are we talking about? Because we can't seem to stop talking about plant medicines and mushrooms, which I fucking love, don't get me wrong, like, those are awesome. But like, I am also in huge support of anybody using synthetics, whatever anybody is using, to just feel okay, to like get through another day. We can't criminalize people for that. And so just kind of remembering that when we're in these spaces and we're advocating for us to be able to use, you know, our medicines, acknowledging that there's other people that might have not been privileged to have the access to these medicines that we've had and have been introduced to different things, you know, at first. And they're not wrong for that, is all. Check out Carl Hart, look up his work. Yeah. I think that's it, though. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. All right, well, before we open it up, because you opened up a box, yeah, on that, I think it's always, while we're here together, it's always a good opportunity to storytell, and history is really important, you know. There's an author, Isabel Wilkerson, that I really dig, who has this quote that's like, you know, the reason why a doctor asks your family history is because you need to know history to be able to actually diagnose an illness for to see what's here, like what led up to this. And what's called psychedelic exceptionalism, which for those who don't know is basically this concept put forward by Dr. Carl Hart that addresses this supremacy consciousness that people have around my medicines are better than yours, or my drugs are better than yours. And it's even just within the psychedelic community too. Like it's like plant medicine versus synthetics. Like that stuff's dirty. All of that stuff is racially charged in a racial caste system, because that is what the drug war was. And so that's what we call psychedelic exceptionalism is actually a form of supremacy. It's what's underneath the my drug's better than yours, I'm better than you. That's really what's underneath that. As long as we're rocking with that energy, we need healing. We need healing because we're tripping. So yeah, just want to. You got another thing? Good, because I didn't want to be the one. Good. But yeah, like little history. There's a great quote on the DPA's website from a top Nixon aide. Dude's name was John Elrickman. If you look up a brief history of the drug war, this is essential history for people living on Turtle Island to know. He just straight up said it. He was like, look, the Nixon administration had two enemies. It was the anti-war left, or the hippies, largely with the white hippie movement, and black people. And so what the drug war was it criminalized drugs that were associated with different identities. But then how those drugs were actually policed was largely skewed to how certain drugs were identified with darker people. So, that's why cocaine charges for the folks on Wall Street were actually much lower than crack cocaine. So yeah, if we don't, the war on drugs was never a war on drugs. It's always been a war on people, on black and brown people, on poor people, on consciousness. Because part of why the drug war was necessary for the dominant systems to maintain domination was because the hippie movement and the civil rights movement were once braided. That's our history too. That's our revolutionary lineage. That there was a time when the psychedelic medicines were helping a bunch of white folks remember, oh shit, we're interconnected. That's my brother, that's my sister over there. We gotta stand with them. We're gonna ride on that bus too. And they don't like that. They don't like that when we start coming together. So we need to remember that in this moment, because what we're doing is truly revolutionary. To actually try to build an intersectional movement that's rooted in interdependence. When Martin Luther King started talking like that, a year later he got assassinated, same with Malcolm. So we need collective, because we don't need more martyrs. But yeah, I know you got last words, so after you go, we'll open it up to questions. And thanks for being here, y'all, and to listen to us ramble.
Yeah, I've just got one more quick thing. It's kind of on a different topic, but in regards to if NMHA passes and you start to develop a legalized system within your state here, I just want to talk a little bit about workers' rights and what we all deserve as workers. Myself as an underground practitioner, and a lot of underground folks that are considering going above board and working within Measure 109 are trying to conceptualize what the fuck does a 40-hour work week look like in a regulated psilocybin service center. And when we move forward with this thought, we get really fucking bummed because it doesn't look super cool. Like I mentioned, I'm a mental health counselor at a foster home. The rate of burnout there is insane. We lose a counselor probably every other week. Average term for somebody working in social work, Department of Human Services about 3 months. You know, we talked a little bit about that trip to Mexico that I went on last year. I was gone for 8 months. When I left, there was 30 people on my team. When I came back 8 months later, I recognized 6 of them. So many fucking people were gone. And we deal with some serious shit there. But if we don't acknowledge that we're going to be dealing with some serious shit in these service centers as people are sitting with the medicine and releasing a lot of this trauma, then we're kidding ourselves, because that's absolutely going to happen. And we need to care about our medicine people, about the people that are carrying the weight of this trauma and carrying like these experiences for these folks and holding these spaces. And we need to give them everything they need to be supported. We talk about the means of production. What is the means of production in a legalized, regulated psychedelic framework, right? It's not the service centers, it's not the medicine, because we all know it's cheap as hell to grow mushrooms, and it's fun and it's awesome, and you should all be doing it, besides the fact. The means of production is the facilitators. We are delivering this experience and generating profits for the corporations that are going to be owning these service centers. And that also means that we are going to be the only place that they can squeeze additional profits off of. The only place where they can cut costs. That's it. And so any folks in here that are planning to work within this system as a facilitator, start researching labor rights, labor unions, local unions that could possibly represent you, and start to work with other folks that are interested in these things, maybe form a separate committee, and start figuring out what your demands are. We want maternity leave. We want mental health days. We want community support for our facilitators. We want good-ass health insurance. We want spaces to be able to eat the medicines with our workers. All of these things that have not been mentioned once in the last year and a half with Measure 109, we need to be talking as people, or at least advocating for people that are going to be doing that work. So that's just an important part that I wanted to put out there. And also, in organizing, keep that shit quiet. Don't let the corporations hear about that part. And for those recording this part on like phones and stuff, you know, don't post that anywhere. You gotta be quiet. Look into labor history. Labor organizers get capped all the time because we are a huge threat to corporations and their profits. When you fight for the workers, when you fight for the power to go for the people that are actually doing the work instead of the corporate executives that are just siphoning off the work that we're doing. So that's something I'm super proud of that we're working on in Oregon. It's starting slow, but get that started as soon as you possibly can here and unionize, both symbolically and literally, with your people here. That's it. That's all I got here.
This is lovely. I see Yolo has a question. Yeah, good. Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. Raise your hands. We'll pass it around. I'm seeing hands. We'll try to just go with hands as they're raised. But yeah, just real quick, I would love to remember that we're in community and savor that as we transition into opening it up. Much love is the password.
Here we go, Yolo. I can't go right now.
Oh, I'm tripping. Because that's what we do.
I think my voice is loud enough for people to hear me. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you're sharing and the experience that you have. I'm gonna try to wrap up my question that it's gonna take, it's gonna cover a lot of aspects on it. When you're talking about decriminalizing, is it because you are part also of that movement, or do you mean in general that is it, that we should decriminalize? When you are encouraging to decriminalize, how would you say that then, predatory behaviors could be avoided, especially when you are allowing to decriminalize all the way around? You are, how can you continue honoring the keepers and holders of these medicines, which are indigenous peoples, right? And how can you continue to actually give the power back if everybody has access? like that, and it's not provided, through the traditional ways. In addition to that, the damage that DN has created, especially with a lot of the indigenous communities, how do you think it could be starting a reparatory process, and knowing that some of the entities here in Boulder, or I feel like maybe Colorado is trying to do something different that DN can actually approach this and defend more the indigenous ways with the label of DN, So, yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. I'm not a part of decriminalized nature. And what I'm advocating for is more generally decriminalization. I understand and am aware of the controversies surrounding that organization, and I am in support of local folks that are attempting to separate from the controversies of the leaders in Oakland and use the tools without furthering harm on local indigenous communities, which I do believe is possible. I believe that there's good work that can be done by folks that kind of, I don't want to say break off from the national leadership, but just don't assume their baggage and their trauma. Work with your local indigenous tribal communities and with your local people, and write policies that reflect that, reflect those desires, reflect those wants. Don't let the beef of these huge male egos that get to talk across the fucking country disturb what we have going in local communities. We don't need it.
Them.
Yeah.
We don't need it. We don't need it. It's patriarchal, and lots of people are subscribing to it and giving it way more attention than they deserve. They don't deserve any of it. I'm appreciative of my local decriminalized nature chapter in Portland, Brian Kim and Alex Wilson and Sari Betaniski. I think they do good work. And I think that it's possible for people across the country too as well. I don't have any connection to the national leadership, and I'm disappointed in the way that they have carried themselves through a lot of these conversations. I've seen a complete lack of empathy and care, and a lot of patriarchal values that I feel like a lot of our folks in Portland are trying to deprogram from. And from what I've seen in Colorado, the Decrim Nature chapter here is as well. It's not easy, and I know it's complicated, but I do have hope that it's possible. And if it's too hard, start a different one. Call it something else. I don't know if it could be that easy, but it's worth a shot.
It could be.
It could be. Third parties all the way. Yeah.
So I'm actually the director for Decriminalized Nature Florida. And
Welcome.
God aside, huh? Can I get the mic?
I can hear you. It doesn't reach.
You can come over.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Well,
You got it.
I've talked to indigenous people in my community. And in South America, which is where ayahuasca is mainly found. And, everybody brings up and continues to bring up, and something that you guys haven't brought up, is the environment. How can we protect nature, right? Because it's not just about decriminalizing the medicines, it's about protecting the environment in which they grow. And after having these conversations, as a director, I've decided that we're just going to decriminalize cannabis and mushrooms. We're not going to go for the decriminalization of peyote, ayahuasca, or ibogaine, because these are traditional medicines that I have no say in, hey, let's decriminalize this, let's open up access to everyone, because already people are going to the Amazon, extracting. We don't know if they're giving money back to the people there. They could say that they are, but we don't know that for sure. There's no receipts. So in Orlando, there's a church called Soul Quest.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're the perfect example of what happens when, you know, you just do things for profit. People have died there, and, you know, they're being investigated. But that aside, we're teaming up with the Florida Rights of Nature Network, who are the first people to ever give rights to nature in the United States. They passed an initiative in Orange County that made it so that Orange County residents could sue the county if they saw a polluted body of water, whether it was private or public. And we need to do that everywhere. So, you know, the water is what gives us life. So I just think that whatever policy is created here and everywhere that has to do with plant medicine has to be intertwined with environmental rights. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much.
It wasn't a question.
That was really important, though, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, first off, thanks. I really appreciate, I feel a lot of energy of, clarity and inclusion that feels really beneficial to what we're doing here. You spoke early on about some of the issues with who's holding power and where the influence is, and that most of the people who are making the decisions are not necessarily the true stakeholders, the true people who are being affected by that. And you spoke to a lot of that in Oregon. I'm curious if you can speak more to challenges you've come across in the gap between that, who is making the policy in Oregon, and is there a total lack of connection, there's no channels of communication there, and if you can speak a little bit to the challenges there, and then maybe if you can speak to what you think we could do differently, if you think the NMHA has more, I know there's things in there, it's there needs to be a board and it needs to include these kind of experts, which I suspect has more possibilities because we have a good connected community here who has a lot of experts who probably know people who would serve on those boards. Some people in this community could serve on those boards. And so I'd like for you to speak to some of the challenges around connecting into networks of influence and how, given the context of NMHA, if that's the one that passes, how we can better connect into networks of influence to help ensure that as things move forward, we can help move forward in a good way.
Great question.
Yeah, really good question. I think SPORE could be a huge part of the solution. Someone told me that there's 8,000 members in this group. That's a lot of people to conduct a poll through, And NMHA has its own polls, but I've never been polled by New Approach Back. I don't know if any of y'all have. So who are they polling? I mean, surveys are really easy to conduct. And so make sure that those systems are in place so that you know how to make decisions as a community and make it as democratic as humanly possible by allowing everybody to have a say in how you'll move forward and put it to a vote. I think is a really important thing to do. So for instance, in Measure 109, we have these advisory board meetings, and at the end of every meeting, there's 5, maybe 10 minutes for public comment. Comment, not questions. So people can line up or raise their hands on Zoom, and they'll say, okay, this person, they'll say some shit, they'll say, fuck this board, this isn't gonna work, you guys are doing a terrible job, and then the person will go, thank you for your comment, next question. And next comment, they don't actually receive the feedback, except for in these very, very concentrated meetings that have happened twice in December and are gonna happen 2 more times in April, and that's it for the whole 2-year probation period of trying to figure out these rules. So there's just this complete lack of communication and this huge wall between the community. The Portland Psychedelic Society hosts quarterly meetings with Dr. Angela Carter, who is an amazing person that sits on the equity subcommittee. and they kind of help bridge that gap a little bit, as much as they possibly can. Shout out to Angie Carter. They work so hard to try to help this movement, and everybody in Oregon should be eternally grateful for them. But yeah, working on systems that will allow the community to be heard, whether that's through polls, surveys, public like questioning, Q&A sessions with legislatures, and people on the committees like Jazz and like Sean that are going to be able to remain trusted and remain in solidarity with the community and actually take your concerns and bring it to these people that are deciding on how you will be able to use your own medicine. Yeah, systems. Yeah. Jess?
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone, thanks for being here and for all the presence and for everybody listening so attentively and being in community together. I have two questions. One, can you speak a little bit about the differences, positive and negative, that you see between NMHA and Measure 109? That's one question. And the second question is, as a member of the steering committee of NMHA, what are things that I can do to better serve community?
Yeah, so I mean, I think just to answer the second question first, it's pretty similar to my last answer. It's just like help create these systems so that there is accountability and feedback from the community that can help keep the steering committee in check. Don't allow them to close the doors, because they are all trying to close the doors so that you all can't figure out what's actually being talked about and how they're going to implement these rules, and you can put your foot in the door and then push it back open for the community to actually have this, this entry into their secret meeting rooms. So that's the second question, and then the first question is like the differences, and I'm obviously not as educated on NMHA's measure here as I am on Measure 109, but the fact that y'all have decriminalization worked into the measure so that you can grow and gift and gather your own medicines within your own framework, basically. There's unregulated models and spaces built into the regulated system as far as I understand. And that's pretty cool. I'm super jealous of that. I also say, don't fucking trust them yet. Like seriously, like don't trust them yet. They'll say everything they need to say to gain a majority of the support so that people kind of like let their guard down, and then they'll fucking switch it all at the last second. And it kind of sounds like they're already doing that from what I understand, so just keep them in check, and outline the coolest parts of your measure, fight for even cooler parts, and then make them promise and stick to those. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Something I wanted to add to that too is like, as the steering committee, you have the ear of them, but then also for yourself and other people who are part of that steering committee, who are the ears that you're listening to, and who are you giving your power to, being like, hey, you three, like, I need you to keep me aligned too, so that there's constant communication. Their community is always entered, right? So like they're relying on you to be the voice of the community, and then you also have people that could really come for you and be like, hey, so like, what the fuck happened, right? Like that, and I'm saying this as someone who like, that's how I run my life. I have my own steering committee who have permission to shut me down if I start getting bugged. They're just like, they have the secrets, they have the codes, they can press the button and I'm out. And like, I think it has to get that deep where we're trusting the people to like be able to allow us to do the things that we do. So like, I don't know, I just think that I feel like I haven't, in my time being on boards and steering committees, I've never actually seen the steering committee have a community that they're beholden to. They're just like representing it, but like who's actually talking to them? And then making sure those people, are Indigenous folks first and foremost, right? Like, that's who should be here and up here in the first place. Like, I was just saying. So, like, just making sure that that gets to where it needs to be. That's
all three of you are welcome to hold me accountable for anything.
Totally.
Always.
One more thing I want to say, just kind of like building on that, is like, there's this line that a lot of these folks are not willing to cross when it comes to actually engaging in the folks that the equity would fight for, right? Black, brown, indigenous folks, poor folks, working class folks, that like New Approach doesn't want to talk to, like they don't want to, you know, like they don't want to cross the line. They want to talk to folks that subscribe to white supremacy, that they can use, that are maybe black or brown, that will meet them on their side and then go and cross the line themselves.
Yeah.
And so another huge responsibility that folks on the NMHA steering committee have is taking those folks and dragging them across the line. Bringing people to the actual table to hear the concerns and not just translating what the communities that are trying to hold you accountable to get to say to the New Approach PAC and to that actual steering committee and all of the folks that are on that. Don't let them put you in that position. Make them cross the line.
Yes.
I am going to keep it real sweet and short. Keep it with the questions flowing. But feel the need to speak to this too. First, just want to say that, yeah, the line between being like an infiltrator or an inoculator, if we're using mycelial language, for these systems that we want to compost, the line between that and being tokenized can get really blurry, really fuzzy. And that's what's staying rooted in community, because this is, we got you. And that's my biggest fear for people who I love, who are in with the steering committee, is like feeling canceled by community or not welcome in community, and then the only sense of community that you're finding is now with the NMHA, and it's like, that's not the road to glory, and we're accountable for those sorts of scenarios as anyone else is, because we're not embodying the medicine if we're not holding all this in the spirit of community. That's why we're doing this. And then collectively, the difference between cooperation and being co-opted, and the difference between adapting, responding to something that happens that, was beyond us and how it started. The difference between adapting and assimilating, those are key things to distinguish. So in being the bridge in composting, it's like how are we staying in relationship and rooted in sovereignty, rooted in our unrelenting commitment to collective liberation. And it's tricky, and that's why we need each other to hold it. I want to, before we move forward, I want to thank you for being really honest about your answer around the decrim question. Was really on point, and something that I'm tender about is I'm loosely aware of the decrim initiative and decrim nature and the impacts that have happened in community. I'm more than loosely aware. I haven't been directly involved in a lot of the harms, and particularly that have occurred, and the conflicts between local people, local indigenous folks, and Carlos and the national leadership. And that's a part of what has occurred here. Also, a part of what has occurred here is an absolutely instrumental way and piece of how the My Coalition and people organized here to be able to leverage power and shift power in this situation was the emergence of this decrim initiative, and Carlos and Larry showing up to actually be like, we'll hold it down with y'all and support making this happen in this situation with No Approach. I've had my own history and beefs with Carlos. I have a lot of love and respect for him, and I'm also like, damn, why you gotta do that? And that's part of family. that's part of community. So I just want to extend the same commitment to community and not canceling each other and being like staying in a restorative process, because we're all learning together, we're all healing together. And they did show up here and actually really did help us, and there's harms that have been caused. Can we hold both together? Because moving forward, we, this movement, so-called, is moving in a way so fast, trying to make all the changes happen and build our psychedelic utopias and liberate all the people and the medicines, and we're skipping community. So I just felt the need to say that Carlos and these dynamics and the Decrim Nature and the approach and the My Coalition and all these different groups and this whole ecosystem, it's more complex than us being able to point to a single place and be like, that's the problem, that's the problem, that's the problem. We're swimming in the shit. We have to compost it together. So that's all. Amen to that. Anybody else? Questions?
Rachel?
Can you can totally also like come inside where it's warmer at this point.
Yeah, we got space. And okay. Where? Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, there you go.
Hold on.
Take it.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear me because it's kind of loud outside. So in the spirit of seeking guidance from community, I have a question, and it's a little bit messy and uncomfortable, but I think someone referenced Dr. Carl Hart's book, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, and I haven't read it yet, unfortunately. I plan to. I would like to. But just the other day, I had someone bring up the point, and yeah, it's kind of hard because, they have personal grievances and did lose a child to drug addiction, and so that's really hard. But I was just wondering, his view was that it may trivialize drug use or drug abuse, and I know that he does talk a lot about psychedelic exceptionalism, which I think is important personally, and I'm very aligned with drug decrim completely and taking a harm reduction perspective, aligned with, indigenous values and as aligned as we can be with including people into the conversation and taking into consideration what we need to really be equitable. But yeah, I guess that's a big question. Just wanted to put it out there because I truly didn't know really how to respond to that. Just like how you feel, maybe if someone were to view that Dr. Carl Hart's drug use for grown-ups, like suggesting that drug use can be done in a responsible way, may trivialize problems with drug addiction. I just want to know how you might have a conversation around that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the courageous question.
Totally. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I guess before I'd blame something like crack cocaine or heroin, I would blame Richard Nixon and his racist administration. And like these drugs, they're not evil. It's like this is out there, but it's like a gun. You know what I mean? Guns don't kill people. Our racist and terrible culture kills people and uses guns to do that. And we use drugs to numb the pain of living in late-stage capitalism, and we accidentally kill ourselves sometimes. And that's tragic and sad, and I would never tell anybody that, I would never dismiss somebody's pain that's been caused by the war on drugs, but I would, if appropriate, feel out the situation. Maybe they just need a hug and they need space and they need affirmations. They don't need to be educated on this in the moment. It's not the time sometimes. But to encourage them to just kind of see that point, that the drugs have not done this. It's the racist government that has implemented these drug laws and that has persecuted people within our communities after getting our communities hooked on these drugs that are to blame, and they are who we should go after, is how I feel. And then I feel like this is another edgy thing to say, but there's truth in everything, right? And I think psychedelic exceptionalism kind of exists because plant medicines are kind of exceptional, at least to me. They're pretty fucking cool. And they're non-addictive, and they allow us to discover these things about ourselves that Xanax can't. Just gonna say it. Xanax makes me a terrible person, and I'll never do it again. I mean, it's just that's me. That's personally me. And we all need to understand what works for us and what doesn't, and then support each other in our choices. But first, we need to have that education around it. So that's my answer. It's a hard question.
Yeah, I think just starting the conversation is incredible.
Yeah.
I applaud him for that, definitely.
Thank you. That last part you said is definitely very edgy. That's cancelable content, but those are the edges that we need to be on. You won't get canceled. You're too cool and nice. Yeah, because I've had the same thought, and I think the thread is
Cancel. Couldn't say it.
I'm not trying to get. Now we're definitely getting canceled because a white dude just co-signed you. So but
Simon just canceled me.
I don't. So I think that we're caught up in the language there because when we're saying psychedelic exceptionalism, we're actually talking about supremacy, and maybe the word exceptional, getting hung up there, we can get stuck there. Point is no one should be being punished or looked down upon for doing anything. But then these medicines are different. These substances are different. So we can't just universalize a solution. There isn't a magic pill of policy reform for all the pills and medicines.
Correct.
So these different medicines have different ways of interfacing with consciousness in humans. For us to be responsible and create responsible stewardship of medicine and healing, we have to recognize that there's differences, so they can't all be treated the same. Just like all people, we say, the golden rule is all twisted because it's really people treat people how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated, because we're not actually all this.
All one.
Well, we're all one, but we're different.
Yep.
We have different needs. We have different ways. We have different systems, ways of being, and different ways of synthesizing life and intelligence. So, yeah, just we need to be able to hold complexity. YOLO again, and we have about 5-ish more minutes. Time? 10 more minutes before Sabrina has to pee.
I don't know why I announced it, but I do.
So yellow.
So in reference to Rachel's question, and I would like to ask Val first to reframe the question because I had a little bit hard time understanding how the question was framed. So maybe you help me to reframe the question so all of us were on the same page and piggyback on what Evans was saying.
Yeah, so what I told Yola is she was saying basically was how do we talk about psychedelic exceptionalism without promoting the use of these other substances?
So first of all, I want to clarify to your question, and I was going to ask you when you were asking the question, when you're referring to drugs, are you thinking that these medicinal plants are drugs? Because that's the first barrier for you to connect with them. Because drugs like Evan said, they are made by the white supremacy systems in the same way that alcohol was intentionally made to imprison people's mind. Drugs, the ones that are, synthetic, like cocaine, heroin, like all these other ones, are actually an extract from the plants with the intention to harm people, to harm especially a lot of indigenous communities. Us, traditionally, we have ceremonies with neutli, which is like, the liquor from the maguey. And that actually is a ceremony that we do, but that we don't abuse. We have ceremonies with agave. We have ceremonies just like, the cacao. Otherwise, the way that alcohol and all the other drugs, they carry a spirit as well. And that spirit, for example, meth, gets stuck to you in the indigenous ways. And we call it that it's like evil, because it transforms the person and brings the really bad, like all these other like negative things. And it's like gets stuck not only to your body. We need to remember that we have 4 bodies: the mental, the spiritual, the physical, and the emotional. And so these drugs, they get stuck to your entity, and they like, push your spirit, your actual spirit, and domain you through your life. These plants, medicinal plants, not drugs, help you to bring you back in connection with the earth, in connection with the healing and the relationship that we have all with the earth, with the elements, and with the fire that is connected to our spirit, that is within our hearts, that is connected to the sun, to the center of the core of the earth, that is connected with the water that is reflected in our blood, that is connected with the soul, that is reflected with our hair, with our body, and the wind that is connected through our breath. These plants first, and this is something that we have been asking, all along, to decrim, to all these movements, to start changing the name of psychedelics to medicinal plants. Because in the way that we're gonna start naming them, language has a lot of power. And how we construct and how we think, how we see, how we perceive, that's how the plant is gonna respond to you. Just like Duffy was sharing about, the mycelium. The intraconnection and the relationship and the permission that you need to ask the plant for you to communicate with it. If you come and like, you're a drug and you're gonna be able to harm me, you already have that mindset. You don't have that ritualistic experience and understanding of respect that is coming from the earth, and that it is carrying a spirit that can heal you. Thank you.
Cocaine and heroin all come from plants. So it's like these substances are like, what do you call it? Bastardized. They're bastardized they're bastardized from nature. So in Colombia, the natives use, mambe and coca leaves, and that can never kill you. You have to eat like a lot, but it's these synthetics, these bastardized
concentrations.
Yeah, that really like same thing with THC. Like it's just when you start isolating the plant or the substances, the compounds from the plants, you start literally separating yourself from nature. Just like Bill said.
What's up, Jared?
That was a mic drop.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Evan said he didn't want to holler back at that real quick. I would love to for a sec because, it's my special number, 757. Because this conversation is a key edge conversation that needs to be had more, and it's very complex, and that there's a couple things, Ben, that I want to just highlight. Don't have answers, but just like things to be curious about. And first of all, and it's Sarah, Rachel, what's your name? Rachel, yours. Yeah. Sorry, Sarah. You're Sarah, yeah. Association. Weird. That's not weird. So first, just to clarify, because Rachel's question was, how do we have this conversation and like do work to end the policing of people who are, regardless of what substances they're seeking out because they're trying to cope, they're trying to heal, they're trying to get through in a society that perpetuates illness, that creates illness, profits all that off that illness, that punishes people for trying to do anything and grasp for anything at their disposal just to make it through the day. And most people don't have access to the medicines, or don't even know about, not even the hallucinogenic or like, the plant fungal medicines that we're talking about here, but even know about food, even have access to like the basic medicines. Community, like,
Clean water.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to like acknowledge that that's what I was hearing, and into the complexity of it when the language piece is so like, I've driven myself mad. Like, what do I call it? I guess I'll just call it all of it, because to some people it's psychedelics. Some people don't like that. They want to call it entheogens. Other people are like, what's an entheogen? No, we're going to call it medicine, right? That's how I feel. It's medicine. But then that gets co-opted by the industrial medical therapeutic complex, and they're using it because the Western white colonial idea of medicine is addressing symptoms, and it's looking at these beings that are our relations as a tool, just as a medicine. So like ideally we would take the time, I think, to call the mushrooms, to call them by their names. But then in the work, in like the movement work, we group things because we're limited by language. So people know what we're saying when we talk about psychedelics, or when we say plant medicine. So when we say plant medicine, that's just the plants, and then that leaves out LSD and the MDMA and the other things. Do you see what I'm like? It's very complex. So this is
mushrooms.
Yeah. So yeah, and then a lot of people call mushrooms plant medicine. I'm like, the mushrooms, if they could slap wood, gently, lovingly, but come on. Yeah, and then just to really, hone in on that other piece, the part about, like how can we be really responsible in helping guide and usher people towards medicine in this way that's not supremacist or like judgmental, and recognizing that part of that is coming together in solidarity to stop the state and the police state to be the ones that are actually like dictating how people are just getting thrown away because it's justified by this society that doesn't want to deal with homeless people, doesn't want to deal with people who have addiction, are struggling with addiction, because that would cost some of these billionaires and these people who profit off of making people sick and keeping them sick to give that up. So it's easier to that system to continue to perpetuate and then just throw the people away and tell the people and convince us that it's the people that are the problem. So does it feel cool to maybe wrap it with that? Maybe a song real quick?